Welcome to PDP, Prime Development Podcast. Become the leader people will follow. Howdy doody. This is your host, Johnny Bravo. And this is the final pillar in the first round, if you will, or week of how to be a superhero. And just to refresh, it's going over 7 different areas in terms of how to improve to be your best self. And since there is so much out there that there is to do as far as all the goals that we have, I found that it was best to analyze and figure out for a majority of people where a lot of these different goals and areas fall. And that's where these 7 pillars came from. And so, generally speaking, that comes down to our fitness, our nutrition, our mindset, our career path, our appearance, our financial freedom, and relationships, whether that's family or friends or what have you. But that is what I'm going over today. And if you can just pick one thing to work on in each of those 7 areas until it becomes a habit, and then you move on to the next step and the next step. And it's going to be a 12-week process. And it can take longer if you need it, but the 12 weeks is a minimum. So each week you pick one thing in each category and you work on it till it becomes a habit, and then you add the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And then eventually you have gotten all these tiny little wins built up to instill really good habits, and out of those habits emerge the version of yourself that you want to become. So this week, going over the whole relationships component, I wanted to kind of bring up, I guess, the first habit change, and it's not necessarily as much a habit as it is a realization, and it's basically that you have to remember that out of all the other categories, this one specifically has to deal with stuff and people and relationships, and these are things that are not 100% in your control, because you can only control your own thoughts, your own actions, and what you do about situations. So in this one, it's a little bit of a challenge because you cannot control the other person. If we're talking about fights that you're having with your girlfriend or boyfriend or husband, wife, fiance, friend, family member, any sort of disagreements, or maybe things are just fine and you want to build on it, whatever you choose to do, you can only do that part of it, whatever is in your control. You have no control over how they react to it and what they do and what they say. So the first thing to understand is that to improve the relationships that you have with other people all comes down to improving yourself and how you act in situations. And it's important to note the difference between acting in a situation versus reacting. A large portion of the world reacts. I mean, heck, that's what social media is for. It's to react to things. They even have it underneath all the posts and stuff. You know, you can click the like button and react to something. But you have to remember that everything that you do or say or think, you want to make sure that you are doing it not out of a reaction mode, but rather act within your own beliefs, morals, and values to create an efficient and appropriate response to the situation. that you would want. I always use the example of if there was like a little child and he was watching you as an example of a role model, you want to always be acting as if somebody's always watching you and you're in the camera. Because that way you will know that you're keeping yourself in check and you don't have any regrets on what you said or did. And people always get those. I mean, that's normal. But if you can be consciously aware of it, that the only thing that's 100% in your control is what you think, do, say. So that is the first step, is just to be aware for the next week or two or however long you want to get this as a habit, to realize that anytime if you are having a disagreement or a fight or you see something you don't particularly care for, or even things that excite you, to be consciously aware of how you are responding to that situation or that action. Because that right there is going to make the biggest difference and spread to everybody else that sees it and is around you. I mean, we've all seen, like, on the news or especially in the media, things get heated up and, I mean, they're going for reactions, but if it comes down to something we're watching, or if it comes down to just an argument that you're having with somebody, at some point, we've all seen it where someone gets so heated, it does not matter what you say, even if it's logical or not, because they're just going to react to that because they feel attacked. And any time that emotions run high, logic usually is low. I have found that time and time again. I heard that, I can't remember where, but it was a guy giving advice to people going through arguments and that kind of thing. But if you can maintain an awareness of what you are doing and realize that you can only control your half of it and not what they do or say, you will be much more likely to keep yourself in check and do the right things. And what happens, this happens every single time, if anybody else is around to see this happening and they see you not necessarily reacting, but acting in a logical, non-emotional way, once that is done, even if you couldn't get your point across to whoever it was at the time, later, they will feel that. They will notice that you kept a level head, and even if they don't tell you, they will know that, hey, maybe, he was right, and because he was not yelling and not listening, and he was actually making a good point, or she was, or whatever. But do that for a week. Just pay attention to how you are when other people are around you. And when they're around you, to maintain a level head and not act out of emotion, but rather actually listen to what they have to say and act accordingly as if somebody was watching you all the time.